Good evening and welcome to the special meeting of council for November 24th, 2021. And I call to order this meeting at 6:04 p.m. As far as the confirmation of agenda, are there any emergent items from any of the councilors? Anything from administration? Then at this time, I'm looking to confirm the agenda as presented. Councillor Peterson?
Your Worship, I would move confirmation of the agenda of the special council meeting of November 24th, 2021.
Thank you. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? Councillor Wagner, did you raise your hand? I think you're frozen. There we go. Oh, you're frozen again. Is this a game you're playing? I like it.
It's like Councillor Montgomery during the forums.
Okay, I think we're ready again. Would that be at Councillor Wagner's end then? Is that? Okay, thank you. So that we have no tabled or referred reports, and that brings us to items, reports from administration. 4.1, 2022 Long-Term Financial Plan, Corporate Business Plan 2022 to 2024, Operating Budget, and 22 to 2026 Capital Budget. Mr. Legore, did you want to start us off?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I'd like to start off by thanking all the staff for the many hours that they put into this budget. It's led basically by Lisa and Matt, and they put in countless hours. I cannot tell you how many hours they put in. But not only them, everybody in this room and many others that aren't in this room spend extensive time working on this budget, and I really appreciate all the efforts they put into it. I think we have a commendable document to present to council here with lots of good information, and I thank them very much for that. Just for the benefit of new council, Mr. Mayor, budget process is quite scary for some people. It seems to be complicated, but really it's quite simple. Administration starts off early in the year and they talk to council about service levels. Do you want to change any service levels? Do you want to increase snow removal, reduce snow removal as example? Cut the grass more often in parks, cut it less often, etc. If council determines there's no changes in service levels, your operating budget is pretty well complete. It's over 90% done, and it just needs to be approved because you're carrying on status quo. Now, when it comes to capital budget, that's a little different because there's items in the capital budget that have an impact on operations. And that's where council should have their questions. I'm not saying they shouldn't have questions on operations, but Mr. Teedy will talk a little bit about when we go through this document. There's no point in spending a lot of time on operations unless there's one or two specific items that you want to discuss. Because really, it's already been determined, service levels are set. Now, when we get into the capital items, we need to talk about them, the method of financing, what's the impact on operations, etc. Council needs to approve a budget by the end of December. Failing to do that, it impacts the entire organization from a work plan perspective, ability to start projects, getting things ready to go to tender, etc. It's a huge impact. And if you don't do that, if you don't pass the budget by the end of December, you have to at least pass an interim budget, which puts everything on hold and then puts a lot of more work on administration because then they have to go back to council and say, okay, what do you want to do with the budget? And then redo the budget and then come back to council again. So I'm really urging council to get this cleaned up tonight. And if we don't do it tonight, we'll call another special meeting and get it done. But I don't see any reason why we can't do it tonight. Now, I know there may be some questions on personnel issues, staffing matters. And if there is, we need to go in camera to have those discussions. My recommendation is that you would adopt the budget, we would go in camera, and then after those discussions in camera, if there is changes that are required to the budget, we would then amend that budget when we come out of in camera. So that's just from an administrative point of how we should deal with it, Mr. Mayor. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Teedy to start off. And once again, thank you to all the staff for your hard work. It's a huge task, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Teedy.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council received the corporate business plan presentation in September and received the Finance 101 presentation 2 or 3 weeks ago. We are prepared to repeat the corporate business plan presentation if it is Council's desire, or alternately, we could go to a question and answer format on the material included in the package that is in front of you this evening. We would like to have Council decide on that issue before we move ahead.
Council, do you want to have the presentation brought forward for you to be a part of, or do you want to do question and answers?
Are you asking, do we want to have a repeat of the presentation you did a couple of weeks ago? Is that
No, the presentation was the presentation we did for Council in September on the corporate business plan, not Finance 101.
And for the people who might be watching at home, the previous council has gone through this after the various staff departments have worked through the budget. We did pass a motion to present this document to this council in November, and that's where we're at now. So it's just a matter of if this new council wants to see that presentation that was given in September, or if you just want to approach it as if you've read the package, then you have questions that might arise from that.
Well, my only thought on the matter is that, so I read the corporate budget, the corporate business plan, but the only page I wouldn't mind having presented to me is page 5 of 76 of the corporate business plan, or in my package, it's page 27 of 135, just the operating budget page. I would sure like to have someone walk me through that. I don't know if there are any other opinions.
And maybe that's a good way to approach this, that if there are pages that are of interest to you or have been a little problematic, you could selectively work on those ones.
Sure, thank you, Your Worship. Page 27? 27 of 135, or page 5 of 76.
You're a numbers guy, I can tell.
So for the operating budget, what we've done is we've put it into our financial statement format, so it's comparable to the financial statements. So the first section deals with all the different revenues that we receive, and you'll find in the corporate package a more detailed explanation for each line item. And then we take off our expenses, and we go through that a little bit in the more detail in the corporate package as well. And then you have an operating deficiency of revenue over expenses. And you'll have government transfers for capital. What that is our MSI. So we are using MSI for our principal loan payments on the town hall. So that's coming into revenue. So that's our total deficiency of revenue over expenditures. The next we have transfer from reserves into income. So this is, we capitalize wages. So that's the transfer to capitalize those wages. The next is the transfer of surplus to reserves. So these are all the amounts that we're taking and transferring into our reserves. So it includes things like your interest, the utility levies that we collect, et cetera. And the final is the principal repayments. So it looks like we're in a large deficit position, but then we add back our amortization because it's not cash. So you can see at the very end, we are balanced, and it's that big amortization, the non-cash add back.
And Mr. Mayor, basically what Lisa's saying, when it's not cash, it's just a book entry, is what it is. It's
yeah.
all it is. It's just a book entry.
Yeah, so no money is leaving for it, so. Does that answer your question?
So I heard you say the budget is balanced?
The budget is
And
balanced.
it's balanced for the 3-year plan?
It is, that's
Perfect.
correct, yeah.
And Lisa, we're required to run a balance, or to have a balanced budget annually, aren't we?
Yeah, I think it's recommended that we definitely do, so, yeah.
That's correct, Mr. Mayor. Under the MGA, you must have a balanced budget. And if you have a deficit, say in 2021, that has to be picked up in 2022 budget.
Councillor Peterson?
I was just saying, Your Worship, there were some allowances made relevant to COVID, but this community did not have to access those allowances. Am I correct, in terms of running deficits? So some communities did run deficits during COVID, and the provincial government did make allowances around that?
We didn't run a deficit.
We
in
did
20
not. I know
no,
it didn't apply to our community. I just wanted to point that out.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, no, we did not run any deficits
Right.
as a result of COVID.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Were there other pages in the package that you have any questions on?
Well, I can keep going then. So I'm still on the same page.
Yes.
So I look at the 3-year plan and I see a balanced budget, which apparently is the law. I love that law. I'm wondering though, what is the assumption of the tax increase each year in order for the budget to be balanced in the 3-year plan?
3959% increase for residential and non-residential in each of the years.
And non-residential? Oh, so what we're doing this year? Is there a reason for that increase? Like what's that make why is that the right formula, that increase?
We're currently running inflation, if you look at the news, in excess of 4%. That 3959 equates to approximately a 4.3 or a 4.4% increase overall. We anticipate inflation and our costs to increase in each of the years as we go through those years. Now, our practice has been we adopt the 3-year plan, but we true up each year the numbers to deal with council priorities in the upcoming year. The second and third year are not set in stone. They're estimates, but we adopt the 3-year plan because we're required to adopt a 3-year plan as far as operations.
Probably what people don't realize at home is when they hear a tax increase on residential property of 3.9%, they think our taxes are going up, but in reality, that's just keeping it in line with inflation, is what you're saying.
Our costs are no different than anybody else's costs. If CPI goes up 5%, for instance, our costs are going up 5% or more. We have to have increase in revenue to offset those cost increases. We cannot find it in just pure efficiency gains.
And then I think also people at home probably aren't aware that our taxes on non-residential, and to me that means business, are actually very competitive compared to communities surrounding us. But I wonder, in the long term, what does a 5.9% increase each year look like? And why is that one higher than residential?
Typically, most municipalities have a much larger tax mill rate on non-residential. The premium that we charge for non-residential over residential is very modest in this community. We're at approximately a 20% premium for non-residential taxes over residential taxes. Another way of saying it is our residential taxpayers are really subsidizing the non-residential if you compare it to other communities. Strathmore has one of the lowest non-residential mill rates and premium throughout this area.
I just want to thank you so much and everyone who worked on this budget. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. I just wanted to, I guess, comment on Councillor Wiley's point about, we're just kind of matching inflation. That is true in some years. But however, like the town's revenue is, the mill rate is kind of reflective or it kind of works with the property values in the town as well. So as there is inflation, if property values are going up, percentages, the amount that the town could leave the tax rate as is, and if property values are going up, the town will see increased revenues. So there's kind of a bit of a balance between, we are going to be seeing increased revenues from the increase in property taxes, and we are raising taxes on top of that. I've been kind of saying this for years. The town has quite a sizable unfunded infrastructure liability. I believe it's around $56 million right now. And so as much as I hate, raising taxes, we need to set money aside quite aggressively. And this is how we do it. I guess as far as the non-residential rates go, I think it's important that we keep in mind that how we affect those rates can affect Strathmore's ability to attract industry. And so I think we just need to be careful. And also, from my understanding from the businesses in town, it's important to them that they have some predictability. And that's why I think that maybe we should be discussing, not necessarily right now, but in the near future, we should be discussing perhaps just some consistent rate increases, just so that businesses are able to budget around that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Councillor Langmaid.
Hi, Mel. On the topic of reserves and contributing to reserves, I see here on the operating budget page that we were looking at before that there is a transfers of surplus to reserves. Are there any other transfers being made? Do we have a plan on how we're going to make sure that we meet those benchmarks? Because I think it is really important that those reserves act as our town's emergency fund. If we compare this to your home budget, that should be our emergency fund for fire, flood, UFO attack, something like that. Where we're going to need money. So are we meeting the benchmarks that we're setting out, and are those benchmarks appropriate, and how do we plan to make sure that we're meeting all of that?
We have a certain amount provided for within the budget. One of the steps council undertook a year ago, or perhaps 2 years ago, was to include in the budget a fee that we added on to the utility bills. And so we're taking that fee, and it's $3.50 per month now. Is it? Lisa, the amount of infrastructure fee included on the utility bill per month, $7. $7 per month on the utility bill, and that's going specifically for infrastructure utility upgrades over a long period of time. So the utility piece, we believe, is adequately funded for infrastructure moving into the future. We do not have sufficient other contributions for reserves outside of that currently. We have not been able to earmark specific funding over and above the bare bones budget that we have had over the last several years, other than that one step. So reserves come by either surpluses or specific amounts that are within the budget. And we have not got there beyond the utility infrastructure piece. Does that answer the question?
That answers the question, but that is maybe a bit of a concerning answer. I think
It certainly is.
I think it's very important that as an organization, we're thinking about sustainability, and part of that is being sustainable into the future and ready for anything that could come at us. And I can't speak on behalf of obviously the other councillors, but from my point of view, not having a plan to build up our emergency fund is asking for trouble. It's like not having a savings account in your home and the furnace goes out. Murphy's Law is that something will go wrong when we're not prepared for it. And right now it sounds like we're not prepared for it and we don't have a plan.
We have a certain amount set aside in our reserves, but they're earmarked for specific types of expenditures going forward. So it's not like we don't have anything, it's just in administration's viewpoint, we have had inadequate amounts set aside over the last 10, 15 years. We have drawn on our reserves as opposed to setting money aside. We have used our reserves. That's been the will of council. And so if council would entertain tax rates in excess of what we're recommending and set that money aside, that is certainly council's prerogative to say, go to a 5.979% and set that money aside for future reserves. We're trying to recommend a balanced amount that's both acceptable to council and to the public, and that's kind of where we're at.
Mr. Legore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I live in a community that for 5 years had a 0% tax increase. They depleted their reserves and used that to keep the community afloat. They were then hit with double-digit tax increases for 4 years, anywhere from 17 to 21% for 4 years in a row. And you think of the impact on your residents when you have to do that. That's another reason why it's important you keep up with a modest increase that's at or near inflation on an annual basis. Otherwise, you fall behind, and then a subsequent council, or even this council, a year or two down the road, will have to deal with it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not suggesting that we're doing that. I'm just trying to provide an example. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Well, in the spirit of transparency, I was on a council here in Strathmore several years back where we used some reserves to lower the property tax so that it wouldn't be a big hit on the residents and commercial. And unfortunately, experience teaches a lot, and I don't know if I would be as willing to do that now as I was at that time. We thought it was a great idea, but there is a real worry that when you do that, you leave yourself in that predicament where your reserves are lowered by quite a bit, and it does put you in a precarious position.
Just a comment from the Finance 101 presentation that we did. We indicated that over the last 5 years, the town has used between $2 and $3 million of reserves to keep our tax rates at the level they were at. In addition to the capital spending that we use the reserves for.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Mr. Teedy? Councilor Deputy Mayor Montgomery?
Thank you. I was wondering if administration can tell us what is the increase in the operating budget as a percentage from last year to this year?
Year over year, Your Worship, it was approximately 5%.
Okay, so like our expenses have gone up about 5%, or we're predicting they'll go up 5% from last year to this year, or next year, I mean?
They're increasing from the expenses from $34.6 million, the budget in 2021, to $36.4 million, the budget in 22.
Okay, thank you. And I guess my next question is, when would it be appropriate to talk about efficiencies and just reflective of the capital purchases that we're looking at making? You know, like if we're going to be like, I noticed some of them, you know, are intended to reduce the amount of labor that's needed to do certain tasks. So I guess, you know, I would like to see that reflected, you know, somehow. You know, it's like, yeah, we're spending a few $100,000 on this piece of equipment, you know, therefore it's going to take less, you know, labor, therefore, you know, this cost here should go down, or at least, you know, kind of, you know, be flat. And another question I have is, and that's obviously kind of, I mean, like that's something maybe we could look at for next year. The other question I have is, I had raised the idea, or I had asked about discussing the budget policy itself. I had there was a point in there, we had amended the policy this past year, and there was a point in there that I wanted to ensure was, I guess, clarified, as far as I had asked for a clause to be put in there that stated that if there was any material changes to any of the capital projects, that administration would come back to council for reapproval of that money. And I noticed, you know, that some of the capital projects, there was a couple on the list from last year that were canceled, and then the money was, you know, redirected to you know, some other thing. You know, it could even be like, you know, say engineering plans or something like that. And in my mind, you know, canceling a project is a change of scope, and therefore that money should not be just kind of immediately redirected. That must come back to council. And I just wanted to, I guess, yeah, like I wanted to clarify what the point of that clause was, if I could, and just, I guess, where does administration does administration understand that now? Because it seemed like I said, it seemed like there was some confusion about the interpretation of that, perhaps.
So Deputy Mayor, are you asking then, is it going to be policy as we move forward that when there's a foreseen cost increase to a major capital item, that will come to council? Are you asking if it's in our policies as we move forward now?
Well, the amendment was made and approved by council, and it's basically, I don't have the policy in front of me, but it basically states that if there's any material changes at all or changes of scope, that administration, and it didn't have a dollar figure attached to it, is any material changes or changes in scope to a capital project that's pre-approved at budget time must come back for reapproval essentially. And so I just wanted to make sure that it was clear to administration that is what the policy says, and that is, I guess, an expectation that council did kind of approve this past year. And I just wanted to make sure that we were clear and that would be followed from now on. That if there's any changes, that money can't be spent on something else, or it can't be spent on the new thing. Like, it has to come back before, and then I believe it even says before any other work, basically commences, that has to come back to council for reapproval.
Yeah, I'll turn to Mr. Legore, but just before I do, maybe you can also answer, Jamie or Mr. Legore, is there a contingency built into different capital items that if there is an overage within a certain percentage, you folks have the leeway to just go forward and carry on with that capital item?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the policy is clear and administration will adhere to the policy. And yes, there is contingencies built into the project, but that doesn't mean you can take that money and use it somewhere else. It is for that project. And if you're going to exceed what you have in the budget, then we do need to come back to council. And we do clearly understand that. Councilor Montgomery's correct in that point.
Okay, thank you. Does that help, Deputy Mayor?
Yeah, and I just want to make sure that we're clear that extends to like a cancellation of a project as well. Like, that is a change of scope if a project gets canceled, and therefore, even if it's just to be rubber stamped, that should come back to council so that we are accountable for how that money is spent. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the recent example of that is when we brought back the arena roof project to council because the bids were more than what our budget was, and we brought that back to council, had that adjusted. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Teedy at this point? Seeing none, thank you for that part.
My recommendation, Mr. Mayor, is that we move forward to the capital budget and go through the items, answer the questions for council that they have. Unless there's questions on any of those other pages that anyone has, and if there is, don't hesitate to ask. Thank you.
I just have a general question, Mr. Teedy or Lisa. With the budget that we potentially will approve tonight, are you more comfortable with what we're going to be doing regarding the various reserves? And I know you're still not totally relaxed about it all, but do you feel a bit better? I want to be reassured, and I want you to be reassured too.
Overall, and we're bringing to council on December 1st an update of our current financial year to the end of September. I think you'll find, I've just reviewed the numbers over the last 2 days, and the numbers are very encouraging to us as administration in the finance world. Considering that, and considering the few items that remain unanswered, and without wanting to open a can of worms, we have the potential sale of our former town hall, but we also have two rather large items that we could be spending significant amounts of money on. And one of those is the back pay for RCMP, and the other is cleanup, environmental cleanup at our pivot fields, Both of those will take a significant amount of money to resolve. Now, we're unsure of the potential liability on the RCMP issue. There's a possibility that either the federal government or the provincial government may take up some of that. We haven't provided for that in this current year's financial update because we just don't know. And we haven't booked anything on the environmental cleanup either. We have an approximate amount, but that hasn't been finalized, and that work was outstanding as of the end of September. So having said that, along with the potential sale of the former town hall site, the numbers for the current year are positive, and I don't want to mislead council. We'll be looking at those numbers in a lot more detail at the meeting in September. So all things considered, if council chooses to approve the budget as is, with the utility amounts going into reserves, I think it's a good balance for the town overall, financially speaking, and I am quite comfortable with that. We're not getting rich, but we are providing in a reasonable way, and we hope to increase our reserves, and we will do better over a long term. Reserves just don't happen overnight. They come from, as I said, surpluses and money set aside deliberately within the budget.
And if I could just hearken back to what you mentioned earlier, for the public at home, a couple of our major projects discovered a lot of contaminants in the soil. Underneath the parking lot of this town hall, there were we found there were stormwater pipes damaged, and the stormwater was flowing through contaminants into Kinsman Lake. That had to be paid, or that had to be cleaned up, and there was a cost to that. Westridge Road was delayed, and we had to take care of that because of contaminants. And now we have to face the situation on the south lands that we own, where there are contaminants, basically because in the past things were put into the ground that should not have happened. And we have got to make sure that the standards have changed as far as the environment stewardship. And so that's what we're facing right now. So I'm glad you mentioned those things.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Langmaid.
Sorry, Mel, I have one more question for you. Do we have any, does this budget have any money coming out of the reserves for anything? Are we borrowing from the reserves for anything in this budget?
Yes, we have used money from the reserves for some specific things. What is the total coming from?
We're putting more in reserves than the one entry to take out.
Sorry, could you say that again?
We're putting more money in reserves than we're taking out. So we're only taking out, yeah, so
That
780 less 162 is what we're putting in.
okay. Thank you very much. That's reassuring to me, and that answers the question. Thank you.
Councillor Wiley.
Yeah, much like Mayor Fuel's questions, mine are also directed for people at home. I think I was surprised to find out like 100 people are watching this at home. I discovered that when I was at home watching it. But so my questions are for people at home who are wondering again, they see budget increases, they hear we're putting money into reserves. I think I'd just like to give you the opportunity to let them hear, like, what are some examples of things that might come up in this town that money needs to be withdrawn from the reserves in a hurry? In other words, I just want to help them understand why they're seeing a 3.9% increase at the same time as we seem to be putting money away for a rainy day.
So on page 20 of the presentation, what is that? So that's page 42 of 135 of your package.
One of the things I could offer, Councillor Wiley, is one that Mr. Teedy mentioned earlier. I was fortunate to be in on a phone meeting with the AUMA regarding the RCMP contract that's been negotiated and signed by the federal government. And municipalities or AUMA, FCM, were not even consulted or allowed to go to the bargaining table. So they've negotiated a 5-year contract with a clause that states there'll be a 5-year retroactive pay made. Now, that's one where we may be hit with a bill of over $700,000, I believe, because we may be on the hook for paying that retroactive pay. Now, the AUMA is lobbying hard to convince the federal government that, you know, this was a contract negotiated without any municipalities involved. We weren't consulted, we weren't asked our thoughts, we weren't at the table, yet it may all be passed on down to municipalities. So we're trying to, I mean, the AUMAs or the Alberta municipalities moving forward is trying to ensure that that kind of thing isn't going to hit us. But this is an example of where we've got the sale of the old town hall potentially that could help us with reserves if we have to face that in the coming future. So that's one of the things. Mr. Teedy?
So on page 42 of 135, it talks about the transfer from reserves into income. In 2021, we had a budget transfer of $731,000. In 2022, the year that we're discussing currently, the transfer from reserve into income is $162,000. Now, on the opposite page, on the next page, we outline the amounts that are going into reserves. So we have $225,000 interest that we're earning on investments that we're going to transfer into reserves. $230,000 utility infrastructure reserve, $245,000 storm reserve, so that's again the utility infrastructure reserve. A transfer of $7,000 of surplus in nature. The SMP Common Capital Replacement Reserve, so we have a contractual obligation to set that money aside because we've partnered with the other Golden Hills, with the other user of the building, and contractually we're obligated to set that money aside. And the same thing with the Civic Center Reserve, we're contractually obligated to set aside $18,000 for future upgrade needs for that building. So those are the amounts that we plan on setting aside contained within our budget.
Mr. Mayor, a good example of where you could get an emergent situation. 2 years ago, we had a leak in a brine line on an ice surface. And we were able to cut down through the concrete to it and found out it was one small break. We were able to repair that. But if you had lost that whole ice surface due to numerous leaks in your brine lines, that's a huge cost. And that's when you look to your reserves, because that's the only place you've got to go to for money like something like that. And that's one of the best examples. If you lost an ice plant, say at the curling rink, you have to go to reserves because we don't have that within the budget for replacement. So that's why it's so critical that you have reserves set aside for emergent situations.
If we had a month-long snowstorm, or a 2-week-long snowstorm might be a better example, and it cost us $1 million to clean the snow up throughout the town, and it could. We have spent $500,000 in some years just as a result of 2 or 3 storms. That's when you need a reserve.
Thank you.
Councillor Peterson.
That's just what I was going to speak to, Your Worship, the snowmageddon that happened in 2013. And then, one of the other things that, Councillor Montgomery referenced, 52 million in compromised or very old infrastructure. I think from data that I've seen since 2013, it's much higher than that. And there's good reasons for that in the historical context of budgeting throughout the years. It's not anybody's fault. It's just a condition of the growth of this community and the speed at which it grew, and that we had to bring water from Calgary. All of those things led to infrastructure projects being set aside. So if we ever had an infrastructure failure, that would be another reason. And in terms of certainty in budget going forward, we do have some around MSI, but that is probably limited. And I think that's something that, that we've been heavily dependent on in some ways over the years. You've helped us build less dependency in that in recent years, but it's something that I think that community doesn't necessarily understand either, what that MSI plan has been and has done for us and what it won't do in the future.
One of the things we talked about in Finance 101 was the reduction of MSI to about 50% of what it has been historically. We've used the MSI substantially for capital projects throughout the community.
Councillor Wiley.
Again, my question is for the people at home. So again, we hear a 3.9% tax increase, and nobody wants that. But I'm wondering if you could just break that down for them. What might that look like each month, and what might that look like annually for an average property in Strathmore if it's a 3.9% increase? I'm just trying to get people at home a better understanding of why the council is very seriously considering, I can't speak for them here, but why I would be very seriously considering approving of this. So I'm just trying to give you guys an opportunity to talk and help them understand too.
A residential property assessed at $350,000, the monthly tax increase would be $10.42. That would be an increase. For the same assessed property at $350,000 for a non-residential, it would be $20.06 monthly, or $240.72 annually.
Yeah, so again, at the time when inflation is hitting all of us hard, we hear taxes going up 3.9%, and it is going to be hard, but that does work out to an average of $125 a year, which isn't nothing, but I just want to put it in perspective for people at home.
Thank you.
And if I could just remind the people at home, in the hardest year that we've had, 2020, we thought it was, 2021, coming off of 2020, we thought it was really important to help people, so we had a 0% tax increase. But whenever you do that, you're forced into a catch-up situation. So that's kind of where we're at now. We've got to try to keep up with cost of living. Thank you.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. I think it's important for us all to remember, though, as well, that we aren't just increasing taxes. We're increasing franchise fees. We're increasing the rates on utilities. We're increasing the fees on utilities, like the reserve fees. So there's just beyond the tax increases themselves. There is, I mean, if we were to, kind of put it all as 1% of a tax increase, it'd probably be closer to 6 or 7%. I have a question for administration, please. What was the sale? So has the sale gone through for the old town hall? Like, has that been completed?
The town hall, while we have what is termed as an approved deal, we have not closed on that deal. We anticipate closing at the end of this month, but we have not closed as of this date. Just further to your comments, Councillor, included in this 2022 budget, there is no franchise fee increase. There has been in past years, yes. There is a utility increase of 2% this year. That equates to $3.16 monthly, based on 15 cubes of water per month used.
Okay. And then like the reserve fees as well. Those went up some percentage as well, I presume.
They did not go up in the 2022 budget. They have, the year we originated, that would have been a new fee, and then last year we did increase it, but there was no increase in this current budget for that utility reserve.
Okay. Thank you. And what was are you allowed to say what the sale price of the town hall is?
The net proceeds that we anticipate receiving is between 1.3 million and 1.4 million. I do not have the exact number. It's approximately 1,350,000, give or take a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, because I'd seen the number, I think 1.2 kind of being bandied about, and that didn't kind of seem to jive with what I thought I recalled. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Teedy.
Thank you. Is council comfortable with moving on to the capital budget? Yes? Okay, thank you. Sorry, Mr. Legore?
So, Mr. Mayor, what I would suggest is we'll take a page at a time, and if there's any questions, we'll respond to them. So I'm looking at page 70 of 76 of the budget. That's the first items for capital, and we'll answer any question that council has. Now, on the left, it gives you the project name, then it gives you the description, and then we give you the funding source for it. And we're prepared to answer any questions, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. My only question on pathway improvement is, I believe there's a different item that deals with new pathways, correct? Like this is pathway improvement on this page.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, a big part of this is rehabilitation, but it'll
Okay.
include new pathways as well.
Okay, thank you. I always thought we had a separate one for new pathways and then one for pathway improvements. Is that correct? Okay. Oh, now they're combined? Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this page, councilors?
Please, Sir Matt, if we're going to answer questions, please come to the mic so the councilors at home can hear it and the public, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So for the public back home, public at home, In the past, we've had them separated where pathway repairs and improvements were one line item and new pathways were another. Now they're being combined. Thank you. Any other questions on that page? Seeing none, we'll go to page 71 of 76. My only question on this page, and I'll turn to councillors again, is, and maybe this is for Ethan. Ethan, can you tell us and tell the public what is our life expectancy that we plan for on vehicles like pickup trucks, 3/4 tons, 1 ton trucks? Donna, maybe that's you, sorry. Good evening, Donna, and thank you.
Good evening. 10 years is the life expectancy usually whenever you would look at selling that truck and looking at the purchase of a new truck or piece of equipment.
And has that increased? Did we increase the time of the life expectancy to 10 years from 7 before or not?
I've always done 10.
Okay.
I didn't know the town did 7, to be
Okay,
honest.
I
I've
wasn't
always
sure
done
if
10.
we had increased either.
I've always done 10.
Okay,
myself,
thank you.
So.
Councillor Peterson.
Your worship, just on the steam sauna, should anybody ever want to read this budget and notice that the steam sauna is a $100,000 cost? I know we had a conversation about recouping some part of that at some point in time. Was there ever any capacity for us to do that?
Through the chair, Councillor Peterson, I don't believe that would be an option. That construction project is now almost 5 years old. It was operational for 1 or 2 years of it, and then we started to encounter some challenges with electrical issues and some moisture challenges, and it's unfortunate, but this does give us hopefully an opportunity to do it right this time.
And you don't think that it stands to impact any of the rest of the infrastructure at the pool?
No, no, Councillor Peterson. Everything else has been operational, notwithstanding COVID.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor Montgomery.
Thank you. Sorry, I had some notes. I had to dig them up from our previous term related to the capital projects. And I guess so, Councillor, I'll comment on Councillor Peterson's point. Yeah, so it looks like we're going to be spending about $100,000 on this steam room. And I'm sorry, Mark, I believe it was open in about 2018, like around March of 2018. So it's 3.5 years old at this point. My question for administration, and I know we just kind of redid the procurement policy, and I don't recall specifically, and is there anything in the procurement policy about expecting or compelling warranties from the people that we're hiring? Like, when I was doing renovations, I did a 10-year warranty. If anything went wrong in 10 years, I would come in and fix it for free, unless it was like the materials failing that the customer chose. And I think that there's no reason at all, considering the size of the amount of money we're spending, that we should not be getting a warranty. We should be protected by warranties for sure in cases like this, so that we're not having to spend $100,000 3 years or 4 years after we bought a steam room. So is there anything in the procurement policy that speaks to getting warranties for work done?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to let Mark to speak to this in a second. The warranty really, though, is only as good as the company provided in most cases. And we've seen a lot of cases where the companies have gone bankrupt, and then you've lost your warranty. Mark, if you could add, please. Thank you.
Through the chair, obviously the policy doesn't speak specifically about warranties, but that could be built into any any proposal for quotation or for tender. Obviously, sometimes when you ask for an extended warranty, that does drive up some additional costs as well. With this construction project, the town at that time hired a project manager, another company, and they obviously subcontracted out various elements of it. And when you do that, you do lose some control of a project. And it's unfortunate where we're at, but in order for this facility to be, or this amenity to be operational, this is a cost of doing business.
Yeah, I don't disagree that we have to spend the money. I mean, like, there's no point in having a non-functioning steam room there. I'll just say that I think that we need to have warranties, and we should only be doing business with companies that have a pretty decent track record in history, so that there isn't a threat of them going out of business, so that we're not left holding the bag essentially. And I guess a question I have, for projects like this is, who on our staff, currently even has the expertise to go into something like that? And, because obviously, I can tell by looking at what needs to be done that there's a total failure of almost every part of that steam room. And so it seems to me that, if we had somebody that knew anything about construction go in and look at that at the time it was built, they would have probably seen, that there was something not right with the way it was done. And so I'm wondering, what is protecting us now from this happening again? With anything that we buy, who's supervising the people that we're hiring to supervise these projects, essentially?
Through the chair, Councilor Montgomery, I'll reference the arena roof. We've contracted out a Williams Engineering to provide quality assurance on this project, and there's been multiple checks, and they are one of an experts on that. I can't speak for the steam sauna. Obviously, it was the construction started before my time, but this is where we can, if we build into the quote, which we have in this one, to hire a quality assurance consultant to help us to ensure that we get what's being delivered from our money.
Yeah, we basically need somebody that is willing to basically put their money and their insurance on the line, that it's done properly. And there are companies obviously that will do that will provide that insurance, but because this isn't the first time we've been left holding the bag essentially for a contractor that has not done the work that we need them to, or that the quality of work that we need them to. And so I just want to make sure that that we're protected in the future. So I'm glad to hear that that for when this is redone, we will have somebody who will be checking that. And yeah, I would say that if we could bring the procurement policy back, and just put something in there about, and obviously I can make a motion some other day, but to make sure that we have warranties built in there. Yeah, thank you. And then as far as sorry, to go off on a tangent here, it's just, yeah, it's really important to me, and it's been kind of bugging me for a bit that this isn't, and I don't blame anybody on staff here. I recognize, I remember how things kind of happen. So I just, going forward, I'd like to make sure that we're kind of protected here. One question I have is, are we funding, are we doing, so we're putting money in towards the Christmas lights at Kinsman Park, and that's $20,000. And are we also funding the Christmas light thing up at the ag grounds as well this year? And isn't that to the tune of 15,000 or something like that?
Through the chair, Councilor Montgomery, we have a 3-year funding agreement that was signed obviously 3 years ago, and it was for $10,000 per year.
Okay, I thought we had changed that. Thank you. Okay, and okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to, I'll leave it for now. I just wanted to comment on the need for covering our butts, I guess. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Langmaid.
Thank you. I'm not entirely sure, Donna, I think this will be for you if you want to get ready. And it's along the same, maybe along the same track that Deputy Mayor Montgomery was just talking about. The piece of equipment that we're replacing, that we only purchased back in 2018. That's a bit unfortunate, I guess is the way we'll put it. What are we doing to make sure that we can, that we're buying equipment that is going to last us for the 10 years that you expect it to, not a rather disappointing 3 years?
I would agree. How I'm going to mitigate that is not purchase an unknown brand, not familiar to North America. Purchasing Cat, John Deere, even Komatsu, it has more opportunities for parts here as opposed to this Louisville loader.
And are we able to do anything with that poor loader? Is it even worth selling, or is it a lemon?
It is worth selling, yes. I think for somebody else, it might be a great loader for somebody else. For the town, it's not a great loader. We have done some work to that loader to get it to a standard that it is kind of usable, I guess. But like I said, anytime it does really hard work for us, in my document here, it does tend to break down. We used it in the snow event, and it was pushing snow around for us, and one of my operators said it's moving really slow, opened up the engine compartment, and it was wires everywhere and that sort of thing. So I think it was just too much heavy work for it, but for somebody else who's on a farm or something like that, I think it would be a great loader. It lifts up dirt and does all that sort of thing, but I think just the heavy snow we had in December was probably just a little bit too much for it.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
And my question is either to you or Mark. It's to deal with the resurfacing of the tennis court. And it kind of is in the line of potential signage before we do the work. And it'll make sense in a moment. I was told that at some point in the spring of this year, someone took a snow blower to clear the court. Now, is there a chance that cracks could have been caused by that? And if that's a potential, can we look at signage to tell people, if this happened, that no snow blower is to be used by the public on these courts?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. There was some surface damage to the court that was done by one of our user groups that did cause some minor cracking, and I would say it's more of a surface issue. The underlying issue is that the large cracks that the pad has settled are not a result of that type of action. Well, I've addressed that with that user group, and we may have to put in some provisions of locking down that facility just to prevent sometimes some usage of that. Hopefully, we've addressed this and we won't have to deal with that sort of damage again. But like as I mentioned, the underlying issue is just time, and that the weight of the pad has like I said, has developed significant cracks.
Thank you for clearing that up, and I have total faith in you folks. So we can move on to the next page. Deputy Mayor, question on this page?
Yeah, just with regards to the tennis courts, when you say resurfacing it, what does that mean? Are we talking like removing the concrete and redoing the concrete, or just kind of fixing the cracks, or what does that mean?
Through the chair, it's almost like a reskimming of it, addressing some of the epoxy and some of the cracks to hopefully prevent it from those cracks from continuing, and then resurfacing, repainting of lines and things like that.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we can move on to page 72. Any questions on this page?
I have one.
Councillor Langmaid?
In regards to sidewalk improvements, so replacements and repairs to the current sidewalk infrastructure to reduce tripping hazards. Through our seniors advisory committee, is there I heard from the seniors who ride around on the scooters that there's some access issues and they can't, cruise the town as much as they want to on those scooters because they can't get over some area. There's some paths they can't take. So I'm just wondering, for this project, is there some sort of way that we could connect with that user group and ensure that any problem areas that they have can be addressed so that, we can see those flags flying all around town.
Mayor, through the chair and to you, Councillor, the wheelchair ramp program, which is just a couple of lines down, is probably more what you're speaking of. This is a program where we spend approximately $30,000 per year to make those locations where it's currently a square curb to have the drop down where it's accessible to everybody.
Thank you, yes, so then for that line item, the same question.
So that program, basically, we've got a inventory of every location in town where these don't exist. It's just methodically working our way through town, trying to get as much value for our money each year.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And I don't have a question, but I have a compliment. I love the presentation, the format of this, the fact that you can easily see the capital project listed as well as the funding source clearly. So I really appreciate this format. Any other questions on that page? Then we'll move on to page 73. My question is maybe it's just a reminder, possibly a question, also a reminder. As far as Westridge Road rehabilitation, I know you folks have been working really hard on it. Two aspects. The top lift is going to be done in 2022. And I just want to make sure, I trust you, I just want to make sure we've touched base with all the businesses as far as exactly what they want for landscaping, because they were very forceful in the one meeting I was at in the summer. I was a little hot under the collar at one point.
Yeah, thank you, Your Mayor. So yes, we are working with each of the businesses. So as we finished this phase, we'll get complete as-built to the project, and now we're going to go through, meet with the landscape architect and lay out that landscaping plan. It'll then be shared with those businesses again. Will everybody be 100% happy? No, but we've definitely listened to their concerns earlier. Some examples are we've removed a bunch of the trees, consolidated trees into more certain areas rather than evenly spaced throughout. So we've taken their comments into consideration, and we're trying to come up with a plan that works for everybody. In terms of the top lift, yes, the plan is to do that next year when we do all the sidewalks and the landscaping.
Thank you. And walkability, we're going with sidewalks as opposed to paving. And is that typically more expensive than paving?
Your Worship, the price is, long-term, I would say concrete is better. And considering it's right beside a road, adjacent to a curb, a sidewalk is standard practice, so that's what we're planning to do.
Thank you. More questions on that page?
Mr. Mayor, also on Westridge Road, we will be putting in the second access egress for the hotel, just for the benefit of all council. If you get any questions on that, that will happen in 2022. Thank you.
That's great news too. Thank you. So we can carry on to page 74. Any questions there?
Sorry, I had 73, sorry.
Councillor Wiley?
So the Willow Drive utility main replacement, this is the new one, correct? This is the one that just kind of came up? Yeah, so I guess earlier I was alluding to the importance of having reserves, and I just wondered if there's somebody who could talk about this utility main replacement and what that would also be an example of something why we need reserves.
Your Worship, through the chair, to you, Councillor. Willow Drive has been a problem road for many years. Pretty much guaranteed there'll be a break every year. We've already had one this year, so hopefully we don't have another this winter. We've been working through the design process of this project for the last couple of months. It's going to go from Wheatland Trail west for about 2 blocks. Unfortunately, the break we had a week or 2 weeks ago was about 30 meters outside of the planned project. So we've extended the project to include that space, and then we're also looking at whether we should be going down another block. We're balancing on whether going another block and coming back and asking for more money would be beneficial, whether doing that in a second phase in a future year would be more beneficial. So we're working through those things at the moment. Considering where the break was this past couple of weeks, that was the westernmost break we've had in the past 20 years. So where the project was originally planned was where all the breaks have been occurring. We've extended that, of course, to include this new break. And once we get a final design, we'll know better whether we have the funds available to continue to go down the road or whether we look at second phase or asking for more funds, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I believe we're on 74? Any questions there? And 75. CEO, Councillor Langmaid, thank you.
Cybersecurity. I see the line item here for cybersecurity improvements, risk remediation, network security, as 55,000. Now, I am a millennial and a techie, but not a cybersecurity specialist. But what I've seen from cybersecurity is $55,000 doesn't cover much for cybersecurity these days. And given, you know, I was just reading about, where was it in New Brunswick that got hacked, and it's estimated to cost them $17 to $20 million. Like, I want to make sure that we've got this kind of, we've got a plan for this and an appropriate amount of budget.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we're confident in the number that we have here will give us the adequate protection we need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Legore. Any other questions on page 75? Compliments on the cemetery. That sounded odd, but the times that I've driven through there or been there for an event, it's becoming spectacular. It's beautiful. The work from you and your staff, whoever is involved in the master plan as well, it's become, obviously, it's a much needed thing for families to pay their respects and to be with their loved ones afterwards. But it's become very park-like, and that's the simplest way I can explain, other than I'm very impressed. So thank you to all involved. Any other questions on that page? Then I guess that brings us to the end of the capital items. Mr. Legore?
So, Mr. Mayor, we can move to approve the budget as per the resolution that's contained in the agenda package. And as I said earlier, if we need to make amendments on staffing issues after we come out of in-camera, we can amend it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Do I have a councillor ready and able and willing to make a motion? Councillor Peterson?
Your worship, I would move that council adopt the 2022 Town of Strathmore long-term financial plan as presented. Do you want both motions together, administration? And the council adopt the 2022 corporate business plan, including the 2022 to 2024 operating budget and the 2022 to 2026 capital budget as presented.
And now that we have that motion on the floor, is there any discussion regarding that motion? Seeing and hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all the staff, team leaders, administration. Not an easy budget, but thank you very much. And does that bring us to in-camera then? Okay, thank you. We have a motion to go in camera. Do we have a
Your
motion?
worship, can I ask a question, please? And this is just about like the budget we just passed. And this is just for information purposes. So once we kind of get a bit farther down the line, we're going to approve the actual tax increase rates. I believe that's correct.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, that is correct. The actual tax rates, mill rates bylaw will be presented to council that will set your tax rates for 2022. And that usually happens April, May, depending when we get all the information.
Great.
Requisitions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So do I have a motion to go in camera? Oh, never gets old.
I can move that. I just don't know the section we need.
Oh, okay. It's section 24.1C and section 24.1A.
Okay, I will move that, please.
Do you have to have it read out officially, Kara? That's okay? All right. So we have a motion to go in camera to deal with FOIP section 24.1C and section 24.1A. You've all heard the motion. All in favor? And that motion is carried. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So we're going in camera.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us